Hello, in this tutorial we are going to learn how to get the last element of an array that fills a given criteria using the cpplinq library, which we already started using in previous videos. So this tutorial was tested both in an ESP8266 and an ESP32 devices. Since cpplinq is a generic C++ library, you can use it in both devices. I've used as target ports Firebeetle board from the FRobot, both the ESP32 and the ESP8266 versions. In this video I'm going to show you the tests on the ESP32, but as I've already said, it should work fine for the ESP8266. So in this case, we are going to get the last element of an array that fills a given criteria. In the previous tutorial, we checked how to get the first element of an array that fills the given criteria, and for this case, the implementation and the code we are going to see here will be very similar. Nonetheless, it is important to get to know the operators that cpplinq offers, because depending on the use case that we are tackling, they might be useful. So getting ready, getting into the code, the first thing we need to do is including the cpplinq library, as you can see here, and declaring the use of the cpplinq namespace. This is just to make our references to functions and operators in this library simpler. Otherwise, we would need to use the scope resolution operator. But since this is a very simple use case, we are going to declare here the using of the corresponding namespace. So moving on to the setup function, the first thing we are going to do is opening a serial connection, so we are able to output the results of our program. And then followed by that, we are going to declare an array of integer numbers, which is the array over which we are going to operate. This is the array over which we are going to apply a C++ operator to get the last element of the array that fills a given criteria. In our case, this will be just a simple tutorial, so our filtering criteria, or our criteria, will be as simple as getting the last element of the array that is even, okay? So this is it, very simple, just to illustrate how to use the operator. So moving on to the actual cpplinq related code, the first thing we need to do is converting this array of integers to a range object, and only over range objects we can apply the cpplinq operators. And we can convert our array of integers to a range object, calling this fromArray function, which will receive as input our array of integers. In terms of the operator that we are going to use, the cpplinq operator, it is called last or default. So it pretty much indicates that we are going to get the last element of the array that fills a given criteria, and in case it is not found, it will return a default value. Okay, so in our case, if it did not find any element of the array that filled the criteria, since we have an array of integers, it would return the default value for an integer. In our case, as you can see here by the array, we have even elements, and the last one is 12, so it is expected that this actually returns a value, an element from the array. So pretty much like the first operator we have used in the previous video, the last or default operator receives as input a function. This function specifies our filtering criteria. So in this case, this function specifies the criteria that we want, which is getting the last even elements, but we need to take in consideration that what happens is this function that we are going to pass as input of the operator will be executed by each element of the array, and it needs to return true if an element fills our filtering criteria. In our case, it means that this function will be executed by each element we see here, okay? And it needs to return true in case our element is even. And then this operator will make sure that it will return as final output only the last one, okay? So basically this is the implementation that we need to follow to our function. So it's very trivial to check if an element is even. It's just doing here the reminder operator by 2, and if it is an even number, it should return 0. One thing to mention that was already covered in the previous tutorial, but as a refresher, in order to make the syntax of our code much more compact, It's useful to use the C++ lambda syntax to declare the functions in line. So this is pretty much an anonymous function because it won't be reused anywhere else. It's much easier to declare it here in line than to declare, for example, here a named function and then having to use it here. So as you can see here, pretty much this is part of the C++ lambda syntax. It's the captures, so we are not going to use them here, so I'm not going to cover this concept in details. So then we need to specify the parameters that this lambda function receives. In our case, as I already mentioned, this function will be executed by each element of the array. So here the parameter that it is expected is an integer because we have an array of integers. Then here under curly brackets we need to implement the body of our function. In our case, as I already said, this function should return true in case the element we have received is even and false otherwise. And then we don't need, in our lambda function, we don't need to explicitly say what is the return type of our function because the compiler will infer for us that we are returning this result, which is a boolean. So the compiler will infer that this lambda function will return a boolean value. So, just also as a quick refresher, we chain multiple C++ link operators using this operator here. So pretty much I'm first converting the array of integers to a range object, and then I'm applying this last or default operator, and I'm chaining these two operations with this operator here. Then after this, as output, we are going to receive the last element of the array that fills our criteria because it exists. If it did not exist, we would receive here the default integer. Then to finalize the code, we are simply going to print the result here, as you can see, printing it to the serial port, and that's it. So this is very simple. The code is very simple. Again, it's similar to what we have covered in the previous video, but my aim here is to present other C++ link operators so we get a little bit more familiar about what can be done and how the syntax of this library is. So I've already loaded this to my ESP32. As I've said, the tests I'm showing here are from the ESP32. It already had here a result, but I'm going to reset the device. And as you can see here, we obtained the value 12, which is, as expected, the last element of our array that is even. And that's it, very simple, and it works. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you have enjoyed.